Hi, I'm Treja, owner of Treja Beauty, and today I wanted to show you a quick run through of my mapping method. Okay, so today I'm going to show you my basic string mapping method. This is about a 10-minute process and gives you all basics of your mapping. You always start with your client sitting upright because once we're no longer 22, gravity is not our friend. And if you map your client when they are laying down, they're going to sit back up and all of a sudden you're going to have crooked brows and not know why. So I do most of my mapping with a string. We start with horizontal lines. So the first line matches at both of the bottom of the heads of the brows, and you give it one little scoot, otherwise you end up with a big blur. So the minimal amount of moving is better. Your second line is the top of the heads, and I tuck it in behind the brow hairs at the bulk of the heads. Your third line comes to the arch. Now because of the arch, you're dealing with the curve of the face, so you go with the highest one, holding your string straight, and then you have to roll it across the face, otherwise you'll never actually get a straight line. So now you have your horizontal lines. Next we come up and down. So our first line is going to be center of the face. Most people don't have as symmetrical of a face as Rada does, and so you're not actually looking for the perfect center of the face. What you want is the perfect center between the brows. So you'll be making a vertical line here. Sometimes the nose and the mouth like curve off a little bit, and so if you do, perfectly center from the top to bottom, your line is going to end up here. So we're going for visual symmetry. Next, we're going to plot out the points of the brow. The first point, use their natural hair growth as a guideline if they have it. Otherwise, what you're looking for is either the center of the corner of the brow or the side of the nose. I'm going to go with corner of her eye and go straight up and down here. And the reason I say 2 points instead of just one is because some people have really big eyes or very narrow noses. If you use one hard and fast, occasionally you'll end up with the brows that are way too close together. General rule of thumb, the distance between the eyebrows should be the same as the width of one of the eyes. So you can use that as a secondary thing if you're not sure which spot to go to. The next 2 points you anchor on the side of the nose. So I'm going to have my model look perfectly straight ahead for me. You touch bottom of the nose, and then you come to the outside of the pupil, and this marks the arch. And to the other side. And the last point, tip of the nose to the corner of my eye, I tuck underneath the eyelashes and mark it there. And that gives you your ideal length. And at this point, if your client doesn't have a lot of natural hair, you can lay them down and go ahead and start drawing with your pencil because she has a good hair shape. I'm going to go ahead and show you the rest of this with the mapping string. So we're now going to connect the dots. Since this is the top of the head and the top of the arch, we're going to connect from here to that point, and I let my line come down to the middle because this is going to be our checking spot. So we'll do the same on this side. And what you want to check your symmetry is that both of your lines are crossing this center point at the same place. Like you're making a nice symmetrical looking X and you know you're drawing the same thing if that's the case. Turn your head slightly to the side for me. The outside, a nice little trick is actually using your client's ear. So to draw the top line, you're going to hold your string at the bottom of that little ear nub that I don't know what it's called and come to the top point here. And that creates your first line. And then you go to the top of the ear nub to your bottom arch curve. And this draws your basic tail shape for you. We'll do the same on the other side. Let's turn a little bit. Bottom of the ear nub. Top of the ear node. So at this point, most of our lines are drawn. We'll go ahead and lay our client down and finish our drawing laying down. So the reason I like to draw laying down is that it gives you the opportunity to stretch your client's skin. The key to a really good mapping is keeping the skin nice and taut so that you can draw really, really thin lines. So now the only lines we really don't have is our bottom arch and then smoothing this one out. So we're going to go from our bottom point here, pulling the skin tight, very gently gliding on the skin with a China marker. If you push hard, what happens is you get caught in the curves of the muscle, and you end up drawing either along the muscle lines or along the bone structure, and you don't create the straight lines that you actually want. So this should always be nice and straight to give the nicest end result. You'll often have a couple of hairs down below. You can talk with your client afterwards if you want to thicken it up a little bit to accommodate for those hairs, but you never want to draw like an L to swoop and accommodate those, because that's how you end up with sperm brows. So we draw a nice straight line, and then we're going to connect that into this tail line. See how I'm gently stretching the skin in a nice smooth movement. And then I always redraw the front so that the client doesn't think they're going to have a perfectly square head of the brow. So we'll just curve that nicely. Now, if you show the client this, they're going to get confused with all of the lines, and then they're also going to want like a half-hour-long mapping lesson from you, and that's not what we're doing here. So I always go through and I remove the extra lines so that when you show the client to get approval, all they're seeing is what is important and what makes sense. So I come in with a very thin swab and just remove what's outside. I never draw both of the brows at the same time, because right now we're working on concept. We want the client's approval on thickness, on the height of the arch, on all the little details before you spend all of your time like perfectly matching the other side. Otherwise you're gonna perfectly match it and the client's gonna be like, no, let's totally start over, and you've wasted all of your time. Turn your head for me a little bit. This is what I show the client. No connecting lines. A little bit of the mapping is still there, but it's not attached to the brow, so there's no worry about what's actually going to happen and what's not going to happen. We're going to assume that she has approved this brow, and so we're going to work on matching the other side. I am going to intentionally draw the other side a little bit differently because I want to show you how I double check my work and make sure that everything is exactly the same. So let's see. We're gonna make this one really thick. That's what we're gonna do. Turn your head for me this way a little bit. Thank you. Stick to that line, and I'm just gonna go like oh yeah, that's a lot of brow for you. And then I clean up any unnecessary lines, because the most important thing is that I know exactly where I want to be working. So you don't want double lines, you don't want super thick lines. Nothing that's going to confuse you. So sometimes you look at a brow and you're so close to it, you're so involved, that when you step back, you can't see where you've gone wrong. You know there's a difference, but you can't see what that difference is. And that's what I'm going to show you my two methods of double checking everything. There, so those extra lines are gone. Come up. It's pretty obvious this one's thicker, but if you couldn't figure out what the problem was, part of why I like these wooden little swabs is that I use this as a checkpoint. So I know this is the brow that she approved, so we start here. I lay the bottom edge on the bottom line of the brow, and I mark exactly where the height is. Here. And then I just carry that over. I lay the bottom edge, and I see that my top line is way high. So now I know I have an adjustment in the head that needs to be made. So I hold my swab across her eyes to make sure I'm kind of level and that, you know, she's not crooked, I'm not sitting crooked. And I just come straight up to where this is laying here and I rock it across. Obviously, when I rock it across, I can see that I've drawn way lower than where it's hitting. So I'll make a little pencil mark because I know this is where my adjustment's gonna need to go. And if I mark it at the adjustment, I lay that there, that gives the top of my brow almost the right width. So to me, that tells me that my top is too high, which I can also see like this. We're gonna go ahead and do the same thing to the middle. So right at the top of the arch. And I always hold my stick perfectly straight up regardless of where I am to measure these. So that even though I'm at the arch of the brow, I'm not gonna hold it at an angle. That way you don't have to worry about matching your angle. So always vertical. I lay it on the bottom line. I mark the top height. I lay it on the bottom line and you can see how big of a difference there is in my measurement. So I know I need to bring this brow up to be able to redraw. Last measurement I do with my stick, I will hold the inner corner at the bottom of the head of the brow. Gently lay my finger on it so it stays in place. And I will roll it all the way out in a nice straight line and mark the very end of the brow. And then I do the same. Bottom, roll it out to the very end of the brow. In this case, they're the same length, so I know all of my adjustments are top and bottom. If you can't work it out just with a stick, the next step is to take a picture of your work, and I will show you how to edit it from there. So when you take a picture of your client, the first thing that's the most important is making sure your client is actually looking straight up and down. So the way that I do that is I make sure that I can see the same amount of ear on both sides of their head. If the client's head is angled slightly to the side, you're not going to be able to make any proper adjustments. So you need to go into editing mode. I have an Android and all Androids have this nice little grid when you go into editing mode. So the next most important step is to make sure that the client's head is not angled to the side. So this is where I use those little grid lines. I bring the eyes up onto a line and I make sure that the bottom of, let me get a little stick to point so my finger's not in the way. So I wanna make sure that the white line crosses the eyes in the same point. So I usually line up the corners of the eyes to make sure I'm on a line. That means I know that nothing is rotated weird, right? If I came in here and it was like this, I'd be like, okay, I can't line up a brow this way. It's not that one's higher than the other. I just need to straighten my image. I can't tell you how many times somebody posts a brow on the internet and they're like, the brows are crooked, I don't know what to do. And it's really just that the client's head is angled to the side. So once you know that you are at a proper angle, you can zoom back out and you're gonna use this same white line for your measurements. So now I'm gonna slide up and I'm gonna get the bottom of the head of the brow. I know this is the good one, right, that she approved. And I'm gonna compare it to the other side. This one's lower on my client. So I would take my little wax pencil and I would make that marking. Then I would slide up to the top of the head and I come across. This one's higher, so I would make a little marking on my client. The next point I check is the bottom of the arch. So I put the line right on the bottom of the arch, check over, look how much lower this one is. I can make a little mark with my pencil. Check the top of the arch. Put it on the line, check it across. This one looks good. I know that there's no adjustments there. And then I come over to the bottom of the tail. This one's a little bit more subjective because this angle on people's faces tends to be very, very different. Rada is, I would say, more symmetrical in many ways than about 80% of my clients. So sometimes a person will be super flat here, and so you'll have to draw the shape of the tail differently. However, to a large extent, they will fall on the same line for where that tail ends. And that's what you want to check for. Once you've marked all those places, you're going to go back in with your client, redraw and correct the brow, clean your lines up, and then you do this process all over again until you're perfect. So often we're just too close. You've drawn so many lines, you can't see anything anymore. Allow your technology to be your second set of eyes, and that's going to give you the perfect brow before you start. When you finish your client, or if you think you've maybe lost your outline, you can do this again mid-procedure. Wipe their brow clean, put on some clear numbing gel so you can see your work through it, take a picture and come back to your grid. It's much easier to adjust before you start and then while you're working versus finishing the brow and then needing to do some finishing touches, final touches. If you do this mid-procedure, I highly recommend you sit them up to take the photo for that same gravity reason we were talking about before, right? If you're doing it mid-procedure, that means you've lost your lines, you've lost your mapping. Don't let gravity trick you by redoing this process while you're laying down. I hope that helps. Thanks so much. So that's my basic mapping method. I offer a in-person class if you are local to Northern California. I am out in Sonoma. It's about 3 to 4 hours and it focuses on advanced mapping. So how to deal with asymmetries, how to deal with one brow thicker than the other, thinner than the other, addressing your client's concerns through a thorough consult. And that is available for purchase on my website.